She grew up surrounded by that world. Medical books stacked on tables, quiet conversations about patients echoing through the house, the steady rhythm of a life built on discipline and service. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was purposeful. And that purpose shaped her. As a child, she didn't fully understand the weight of what her parents were building. But she could see the effort. The late nights. The sacrifices. The constant push forward despite uncertainty. Have you ever grown up watching someone chase something bigger than themselves? It leaves a mark. For her, that mark became direction. She didn't just want success. She wanted meaning. And over time, that desire evolved into a career that would eventually redefine an entire space. Dermatology wasn't just about skin. Not for her. It was about confidence. Identity. The invisible struggles people carry every day. Think about it. How many people hide parts of themselves because of something as simple as a skin condition? How many avoid photos, conversations, opportunities, because they don't feel comfortable in their own skin? She saw that up close. And she leaned into it. What started as a clinical practice slowly transformed into something much bigger. She began sharing her work. At first, it was simple. Educational content, small glimpses into procedures, explanations designed to inform and demystify. But then something unexpected happened. People didn't just watch. They connected. They stayed. They shared. Why? Because she was showing something most people never talk about. The raw, unfiltered reality of skin conditions. The procedures. The transformations. The emotional journeys behind them. And suddenly, a niche that many avoided became something millions were drawn to. It wasn't just curiosity. It was relief. Relief that someone was finally talking about it openly. Relief that they weren't alone. Relief that solutions existed. And just like that, her platform exploded. Views climbed into the millions, then billions. Patients traveled from across the world. What she built wasn't just a clinic anymore. It was a global brand. But here's something worth questioning. What does it cost to operate at that level for years? To constantly perform, constantly deliver, constantly meet expectations, both your own and everyone else's? Because success doesn't slow things down. It accelerates everything. More patience. More filming. More responsibility. More pressure. And pressure, when left unchecked, doesn't just disappear. It accumulates. Quietly. Gradually. Until one day, it demands attention. That ordinary workday, the one where everything began to unravel, didn't feel like a warning at first. There were no alarms. No dramatic signals. Just subtle shifts. A wave of heat. A sense of disorientation. A feeling that something wasn't quite right. But she had work to do. Patients were waiting. Cameras were rolling. So she pushed through. And if you're honest with yourself, haven't you done the same? Ignored the headache. Dismissed the fatigue. Told yourself, I'll deal with it later. Because stopping feels inconvenient. Because slowing down feels like falling behind. Because we convince ourselves that we're fine. Until we're not. That evening, the discomfort lingered. Then came the pain in her leg. Sharp. Unusual. But still, explainable. Maybe it's just muscle strain. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's nothing. How often do we search for explanations that make us feel safe rather than ones that are actually true? Then came the stairs. Something as simple as walking down them felt wrong. Her balance wasn't steady. Her body didn't respond the way it should. And yet, even then, panic didn't fully set in. Because denial is powerful. It softens reality. It buys us time, sometimes at a cost. The next morning stripped that comfort away. She extended her hand. And it weakened. Not slightly. Not subtly. Noticeably. Then her speech shifted. Words didn't flow the same way. Clarity disappeared. And in that moment, the truth became impossible to ignore. Am I having a stroke? It's a terrifying question. But what's even more unsettling is this. She knew the answer. She had spent years studying exactly these symptoms. She had likely explained them to patients countless times. Face drooping, weakness, slurred speech, confusion. She recognized every single sign. And still, there was hesitation. Why? Because knowledge doesn't always override emotion. Because even experts are human. Because accepting something serious about your own body is far harder than identifying it in someone else. This is where her story takes a critical turn. Because while she hesitated, someone else didn't. Her father saw it immediately. No second guessing. No rationalizing. No delay. Go to the emergency room. That moment, simple, direct, urgent, changed everything. How many lives are shaped by decisions like that? A single moment where someone chooses action instead of hesitation. At the hospital, the diagnosis confirmed what she feared. An ischemic stroke. A blockage cutting off blood flow to the brain. It's clinical when you say it like that. But the reality is far more severe. Every minute during a stroke, brain cells die. Not temporarily. Permanently. Think about that. Millions of cells. Gone. Every minute. And unlike other parts of the body, the brain doesn't easily recover from that loss. When she later described it, she didn't complicate it. She said it plainly. A part of her brain had died. There's something powerful about that level of honesty. No dramatization. No exaggeration. Just truth. And that truth carries weight. Because for her, this wasn't just a health scare. It was a direct threat to everything she had built. Her career depended on precision. Steady hands. Clear speech. Sharp thinking. All of it. Suddenly uncertain. Imagine waking up one day knowing that the very skills your life depends on might not function the same way again. What would you do? Would you panic? Would you fight? Would you feel lost? For her, the immediate focus wasn't the brand. It wasn't the audience. It was survival. Stabilization. Recovery. Everything else came second. Filming stopped. Projects paused. Momentum halted. And in that stillness, something shifted. Because when life forces you to stop, it also forces you to reflect. What matters? What doesn't? What have you been ignoring? What have you been prioritizing at the expense of something more important? These aren't easy questions. But they're necessary ones. In her case, the answers were uncomfortable. The risk factors had been there all along. High blood pressure. High cholesterol. Chronic stress. None of them new. None of them surprising. Just unmanaged. And that's where her story becomes less about her, and more about everyone else. Because how many people are living the same way? Functioning. Achieving. Building. While quietly ignoring the warning signs their bodies are sending. It's easy to think, it won't happen to me, until it does. Doctors are now seeing a shift. Strokes aren't just affecting the elderly. They're appearing more frequently in people in their 40s and 50s. Midlife. The years where careers peak. Responsibilities stack. Stress becomes constant. And health often gets pushed to the background. Why? Because there's always something more urgent. Work. Family. Deadlines. Goals. Health becomes something you'll get to later. But later isn't guaranteed. That's the uncomfortable truth. Her story highlights something deeper than a medical event. It exposes a pattern. A cycle that many people are trapped in. Push harder. Ignore the signs. Keep going. Until the body forces a stop. And when that stop comes, it's rarely convenient. Recovery wasn't instant. It wasn't simple. It required patience, adaptation, and a willingness to accept a new reality. Something high performers often struggle with. Because when you're used to control, losing even a small part of it feels overwhelming. But recovery also brought clarity. A different kind of clarity. Not about procedures or techniques, but about priorities. About limits. About listening to the body instead of overriding it. And perhaps most importantly, about sharing that lesson. Because her platform didn't disappear. If anything, it gained a new dimension. Now it wasn't just about treating others. It was about educating them on something even more fundamental. Prevention. Awareness. Taking symptoms seriously. Asking questions sooner. Acting faster. Let's pause here for a moment. If you felt something unusual in your body today, something you couldn't fully explain, what would you do? Would you ignore it? Would you wait? Would you convince yourself it's nothing? Or would you act? That question matters more than most people realize. Because in situations like hers, time isn't just important. It's everything. The faster you respond, the better the outcome. The longer you wait, the greater the damage. Simple, but often ignored. Her journey didn't end with the stroke. In many ways, it began there. Because surviving something like that changes you. It reshapes how you see time, energy, health, success. And it raises a final, powerful question. What's the point of building something extraordinary if you lose the ability to experience it? It's a question without a simple answer. But it's one worth thinking about. Because her story isn't just about a doctor, or a brand, or a medical emergency. It's about balance, awareness, and the cost of ignoring what matters most. She built something remarkable. That part of the story doesn't change. But what nearly took it all away, that's the part people can't afford to overlook. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not the success, not the fame, but the reminder that even the strongest, smartest, most accomplished people are still human, still vulnerable, unless they choose not to. So the question now is simple. Will you? She followed the path. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. A straight line. A plan unfolding the way it was supposed to. But in reality, it was anything but smooth. There were moments, quiet, heavy moments, when everything seemed uncertain. One of those moments came early, when she failed to secure a position in her chosen specialty. It wasn't just a professional setback, it felt personal. Years of effort, late nights, sacrifices, suddenly suspended in doubt. She remembered sitting alone afterward, replaying everything in her mind. What went wrong? Was I not good enough? Did I choose the wrong path entirely? Have you ever faced a moment like that, when the door you were so certain would open simply didn't? For a while, she considered stepping away. Doing something safer. Something predictable. But something in her resisted that idea. So she pushed through. She adapted. She took opportunities that weren't part of the original plan. Learned things she hadn't expected to learn. Met people who challenged her thinking. Slowly, almost quietly, she found her way back, not to the exact same place, but to something stronger. And in hindsight, that detour didn't break her path. It reshaped it. Years later, she made another decision, one that didn't seem particularly important at the time. She started sharing her work online. At first, it felt awkward. Who was she really speaking to? Would anyone even care? The early days were quiet. A few views. A handful of comments. Mostly silence. There were moments she almost stopped. What's the point? She wondered. But she kept posting. Then, one day, something changed. One video, just one, caught attention. It spread faster than she expected. People began sharing it, commenting, reacting. Within days, thousands were watching. Then millions. And suddenly, people couldn't look away. What was once considered too graphic, too specific, too niche, became strangely fascinating. Why? Maybe it tapped into something deeper. Human curiosity about the body, about transformation, about the hidden processes we rarely see. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it felt real. In a world filled with filters, edits, and polished illusions, her work showed something unfiltered. Honest. Raw. And people responded to that. Her audience grew rapidly. What began as a small, uncertain experiment turned into something much larger. Invitations followed. Collaborations. Media attention. Television appearances. Product lines. Recognition from places she had never imagined. Her name began to travel far beyond the walls of her workplace. But with growth came pressure. More content. More expectations. More demand to stay consistent, relevant, visible. And like many people who find success, she kept pushing forward. Because stopping didn't feel like an option. Have you ever been in that position, where slowing down feels riskier than continuing, even when you know you're exhausted? Then, without warning, everything stopped. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't something she could plan for. Her body forced the pause. A stroke. The word itself felt distant at first, like something that belonged to other people, other lives. Not hers. But reality set in quickly. Recovery wasn't simple. The days that followed were not filled with productivity or progress in the way she once understood it. Instead, they were slow, measured, sometimes frustrating. Basic things had to be relearned. Balance, coordination, strength. Even holding instruments, the very tools she had mastered over years, felt uncertain. She remembered the first time she tried again. Her hands didn't respond the way they used to. There was hesitation, doubt, a lack of control that frightened her more than she expected. Imagine dedicating years to perfecting a skill, and then suddenly questioning whether you can perform it at all. Her speech changed too. To others, the differences were subtle, almost unnoticeable. But she noticed. Every pause. Every slight shift in tone. Every moment where words didn't come as easily. And that awareness created something new for her. Self-consciousness. For someone who had spent years speaking confidently on camera, that change was deeply unsettling. Would people notice? Would they judge? Would they see her differently? For months, she stepped away from everything. No filming. No procedures. No public presence. Just rehabilitation. Time moved differently during that period. Slower. More deliberate. There were small victories, lifting something without dropping it, completing a movement without hesitation, speaking a sentence clearly. Things that once required no thought now demanded full attention. And in those quiet, repetitive moments, she began to reflect. Not just on her work, but on her life. What had she been ignoring? What signals had her body been sending long before this happened? Have you ever wondered how many warning signs we overlook simply because we're too busy to notice? Eventually, she returned to work. But it wasn't the same. The room looked familiar, the equipment, the setup, the routines, but the feeling had changed. There was fear now. A quiet awareness in the background of everything she did. Every movement carried a question. Can I still do this the way I used to? Every day was a mix of confidence and caution. And the place that once represented growth and achievement now also held the memory of interruption. Have you ever gone back to a place where something life-changing happened? It alters everything. Even if nothing around you has changed, you have. What makes her story even more powerful is what she chose to do next. She could have kept everything private. No one outside her closest circle needed to know. She could have continued working, letting the world assume that nothing had happened. But she didn't. She spoke openly. And that wasn't easy. In many cultures, including her own, health struggles are kept quiet. Treated as deeply personal. Sometimes even seen as a form of weakness. So why share it? Why risk being seen differently? Because she wanted people to recognize the signs. To act sooner. To understand that these things don't just happen out of nowhere. Think about that for a moment. How often do we wait? Wait for symptoms to become unbearable. Wait for the right time to take care of ourselves. Wait until something forces us to stop. What if we didn't? She described the stroke not as a dramatic turning point, but as a practical one. A moment that forced change. It made certain things non-negotiable. Daily medication. Regular monitoring. Lifestyle adjustments. Not optional anymore. Necessary. And within that forced pause, she discovered something unexpected. Clarity. A clearer understanding of what actually matters. Not just success. Not just productivity. But health. Time. Presence. The ability to live without constant pressure. Today, she's back. Working again. Speaking again. Rebuilding. From the outside, it might look like everything has returned to normal. But internally, it hasn't. Because experiences like that don't simply disappear. They stay with you. They reshape how you think, how you work, how you live. You don't go back to who you were before. You move forward as someone new. More aware. More intentional. More careful about what you ignore. So here's the final question. What would it take for you to stop ignoring the warning signs in your own life? Would it have to be something this serious? Or could you choose to act sooner? Because her story isn't just about a medical emergency. It's about something many people quietly face, especially in midlife, a widening gap between what we demand from ourselves and what our bodies can actually sustain. It's about recognizing that success loses its meaning when it comes at the cost of health. And it's about understanding that sometimes the most important turning points don't come from achievement, but from interruption. Moments that force us to pause, to reflect, to reconsider everything we thought mattered. In the end, this isn't the story of someone who almost lost everything. It's the story of someone who was forced to redefine what everything truly means. And maybe, just maybe, it's a question for all of us. What does everything mean to you? Before something forces you to find out.